Putting Whiteness Under the Microscope. I'm Dyers Goal, and I'm your lecturer for this series. Although scholars and writers like Cornel West, James Baldwin, Stuart Hall, and Bell Hooks have all looked at whiteness, Richard Dyer took a sustained look at the ubiquitous yet invisible nature of whiteness in his essay White from 1988, and later in his book White, Essays on Race and Culture, an analysis of media representations of whiteness in the West. In the latter work, Dyer argued that in Western culture, the essential everydayness of whiteness allows white people to create the dominant images of the world and yet be able to see that they construct the world in their image. Dyer's work here is the fountainhead of an emerging field, White Studies. By looking to reorient ethnicity, Dyer sought to bring into fruition the study of whiteness as a valid field of cultural inquiry into being. In his essay White, Dyer emphasized the role of blackness in demarcating whiteness. Dyer set an ambitious goal of making whiteness strange. He also complicated essentialist understandings of whiteness in terms of race by analyzing whiteness through the articulation of gender and class. Moreover, he situated whiteness within the historical and cultural conditions that have made white identity in Western society and beyond the standard par excellence by which all others are measured, whether by beauty, power, reason, etc. In her book Yearning, Bell Hooks in 2009 noted of pursuing a critique of whiteness that she wanted white people who are giving, quote, blacks their take on blackness to let them know what's going on with whiteness, unquote. A criticism of whiteness studies is frequently that it places whiteness at the center, where it has always resided. Dyer himself noted this when he referred to the green light problem, where white people are given the go-ahead to continue the focus on themselves. Likewise, he argued that White Studies runs the risk of so-called Me Tooism, where white people claim victimization. Notwithstanding these criticisms, the critique of whiteness lays bare one of the most powerful tools in the arsenal of the dominant culture during the Civil Rights era and even today. What Dyer argued is the assumption that white people are just people, that what they do and say is the normal. As Dyer rightly noted, this assumption rests upon two simple assertions. The first is that to study and to be interested in the race question means that one is interested in racial imagery other than that of white people. And two, intimate to white culture, is the notion that just as white people are just people, it necessarily means that those deemed non-white are something else. Dyer considered whiteness a paradox, because white is both a combination of colors and yet no color at all. It describes a racial designation that has universality without ethnicity, which allows white people to not be racially marked. He argued that white people are represented everywhere, but not as represented to themselves as white. This allows those possessing whiteness to be inoculated against stereotyping, because white is infinite in variety and representative of humanity. In other words, because they are represented as the norm. Many white people do not consider themselves as variously gendered, classed, raced, sexualized, and abled. Indeed, they do not see themselves within the context of race. They are the human race. Dyer argued that his goal is to undermine white authority and dislodge whiteness from positions of power. He wrote, "There is no more powerful position than that of being just human. The claim to power is the claim to speak for the commonality of humanity. Raced people can't do that. They can only speak for their own race. But non-raced people can, for they do not represent the interests of race. The point of seeing the racing of whites is to dislodge them from the position of power, with all the inequities, oppression, privileges, and sufferings in its train, dislodging whiteness by undercutting the authority with which they speak and act in and on the world." Dyer here emphasized his desire for white critique, to undermine white authority, and to dislodge white people from positions of power. In order to fully complete this task, there must be a way put forward in theory and practice that will allow for living with whiteness. The scholar Henry Giroux, in 1997, argued that there should be a holistic approach that includes a critical analysis of whiteness that addresses its historical legacy and complicity in racial exclusion and oppression. But it is important to go beyond revealing whiteness as an ideology of privilege and domination, mediated largely through the dynamics of race. Rather, the goal should be to link identity and difference to a broader vision of racial democracy. In other words, the task should be to find a way so that both white and non-white all have a stake in their racial identity, but one that allows them to assert a view of political agency in which they can join with diverse groups around a notion of democratic public life that affirms racial differences through a re-articulation of cultural, social, and political citizenship. I'm Elizabeth Glasgow. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe.